Hey guys, Izzy here, back with another video, and today we're actually going to be doing a tier list. It's been a while since I've done a tier list in the channel before, so I figured might as well do one since we are going to be having Series 2 pretty soon for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and so today we'll be, of course, tier listing the Paradox Pokemon that are going to be allowed in Series 2, and ranking them on how good they're going to be in Series 2's VGC. So mainly we'll be focusing on, of course, doubles. Now for singles, it might kind of apply still, since for singles, most of the S tier Pokemon that you're going to see here are still going to be very good for, singles. But this is mainly just doubles, so just keep that in mind when watching the video. Anyways, let's get right into it, right? Let's start off with the past Paradox Pokemon and work our way up to the future Paradox Pokemon. And for the first one, we have Bonnet. Now, Bonnet has pretty much all the good qualities Amoonguss has and more, with stats being higher than Amoonguss, like its higher defense and SPDEF stat being both 99, while HP being just a few points off at 111 HP, and it has access to both Spore and Rage Powder, except it lacks a very important aspect Amoonguss has, which is its longevity. It lacks Regenerator, pretty much. Bonnet, however, is capable of being more than just a tanky redirector and Spore user. It can also be an offensive threat, behind Trick Room, of course. Its speed stat is higher than Amoonguss, but it's still low enough to where you can take advantage of Trick Room, and it has access to very strong stab moves such as Sucker Punch, Crunch, and Seed Bomb. You can still utilize Bonnet as you would, an Amoonguss typically, and it would still work pretty well. It just feels that you're better off using Amoonguss if you're not really using this Pokemon offensively, but I could be wrong. For that reason, this mon for me is going to be a B tier threat. So yeah, in my opinion, it's just not that big of a threat. It's still a really good option for Trick Room, like I said. However, it's gonna lack a lot of power, and compared to the other Pokemon in this tier list, which is a much better option for Trick Room, we'll get to him in just a moment. Anyways, let's move on to Flutter Mane. Now, Flutter Mane is an easy S tier. Like, Flutter Mane is probably the easiest S tier Pokemon to slap on a team. This thing has an incredible base 135 on both special attack and speed, making Flutter Mane an absolute menace offensively. It has 135 base SPDEF as well, but it has a very abysmal 55 HP, and defense as well is 55. And so it kind of just makes this thing a literal glass cannon. It has access to strong stat moves in Shadow Ball, Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, and a plethora of coverage options like Mystical Fire, Power Gem, Psyshock, Energy Ball, and Thunderbolt. But not only that, it has access to Icy Wind for some speed control and Taunt to potentially stop Trick Room from going up, which would be pretty bad for it. Flutter Mane is insanely strong and can perform exceptionally well without the help of a team, and just absolutely is going to be an early meta pick, and probably one that will stay through the seasons. So expect to see a lot of them, since they handle quite a few of the current meta picks like Goldango and Hydreigon. Now, let's go ahead and move towards Great Tusk. Now, Great Tusk is another S tier Pokemon. Now, the reason as to why, Great Tusk is an S tier Pokemon, Great Tusk is an absolute beast. Not just design-wise, but these stats are just fucking crazy. Base 115 HP and 131 on both attack and defense, coupled with the decent 87 speed, this thing is a monster. Not only is it physically tanky as hell, but also has crazy good stab moves to pair with its crazy high attack, such as Earthquake, Close Combat, and Headlong Smash for single target ground stab. Great Tusk also learns very good supported stab moves such as Brick Break for clearing screens and Bulldoze for speed control. as well as knockoff for item removal, which is not stab, but it's still worth mentioning. It learns several coverage moves, but I don't believe a lot of these will be used very often, but it has access to the elemental fang moves. This Mon can easily focus on attack and speed, and still tank physical hits without much care in the world, but can also just focus easily on HP and defense and manage to do massive amounts of damage while providing support to the team. All in all, Great Tusk is easily gonna be a common threat to look out for, thus making it an S tier threat. Now moving along, we have Roaring Moon, and this is yet another S tier Pokemon. Not only does this thing just look menacing as hell, Roaring Moon is an insanely good Pokemon, a whopping base 139 attack stat and 119 speed, coupled with an incredible natural bulk with base 105 HP, 71 defense, and 101 SPDEF. Roaring Moon is going to be a favorite for sure. It has access to strong physical stab moves like Dragon Claw, Throat Chop, Crunch, and Outrage, but it also learns some really good supportive stab moves like Jaw Lock to actually trap your opponents, and Breaking Swipe to lower both opposing Mon's attack stat, kind of like a pseudo Intimidate since it already loses that. Roaring Moon also gets access to Tailwind, and it's worth mentioning since this Mon is very fast, so it's a viable option to run Tailwind on it. As if that wasn't enough, this Mon also learns Dragon Dance and Roost, making it an even bigger threat if it manages to set up, which really wouldn't be too hard considering how bulky this Pokemon can be. And it's made even more threatening, believe it or not, when looking at the wide variety of coverage options it can run, such as Earthquake, Sun Headbutt, Iron Head, Rock Slide, and U-Turn. It's also worth mentioning it gets access to Snarl and Dragon Tail, as it serves as a good damage mitigation and facing a potential threat out of the field. Alright, so we have our next Paradox Pokemon, which is going to be Sandy Shocks. Now, Sandy Shocks is the first C tier Pokemon. It's not because it's a bad Pokemon by any means, but it's just not as big of a threat as the other Mons before it. Sandy Shocks is mainly offensive, having a very good 121 special attack and decent 101 speed. It somewhat lacks the firepower that the other specially offensive Paradox Pokemon have to offer. Now, under the right conditions, it can definitely go crazy, like under rain and electric terrain. It can spam some very juicy Specs Thunders. Sandy Shocks has access to a few good stab moves like Earth Power, Thunderbolt, Bolt Switch, and Discharge, along with good supportive moves like Screens and Eerie Impulse. Though there are better options out there for Screens, and I really do believe that Sandy Shocks would have definitely benefited from learning Electro Web and maybe more coverage options other than Flash Cannon. This Mon suffers from what feels like a very limited move pool, but I do believe that this Pokemon can definitely be good, or at least definitely a good pick under the right support and team. Now, let's go ahead and move into the next Paradox Pokemon, and that's Screamtails. So, Screamtail is a very good Pokemon, but honestly, I'm gonna be real with you, this Pokemon is definitely in the C tier as well. Now, hear me out. The only reason I am putting this so low on the list is because most of, if not all, that Screamtail is good at, another Pokemon is way better at it than them. And, you know, except for maybe something like Parasong. Screamtail is super bulky, and their main thing is to be bulky. Base 115 HP, 90 defense, and 115 SPDEF make this Pokemon a tough one to get rid of. Screamtail has a lot of very good supportive options in its move pool, such as Wish, Sing, Howl, Noble Roar, and most importantly, Parasong. It also has access to Screens, and while this Mon is way too fast to benefit from Trick Room, it can have it to deny the opposing Trick Room. So yeah, against Trick Room is what I'm saying. Screamtail can also serve as a good sunsetter outside of the usual Torkoal and has access to fake tears, which is worth mentioning. The issue with Screamtails is that everything that it does, they're probably second or third best at. For maybe Parasong is the only real exception, as it is a very bulky Pokemon, so it's kind of hard to really, get rid of. I can see this Pokemon pop up in most Parasong teams in Series 2, and I can see myself absolutely hating the sight of this Pokemon. But yeah, let's go ahead and move into our last past Paradox Pokemon, Slither Wing. And honestly, Slither Wing is going to be an A tier threat. So Slither Wing is going to be our first A tier threat. Slither Wing is an absolute powerhouse. A whopping 135 base attack and absolute monstrous stab moves like First Impression, Lunge, Leech Life, and Close Combat, as well as a U-turn for pivoting, Low Sweep for speed control, and Brick Break for screens. While the coverage options for this Pokemon are somewhat limited, they're still pretty strong, like Earthquake, Stomping Tantrum, Flare Blitz, and Send Headbutt. Slither Wing would probably be ranked S tier if it wasn't for the limited pool and also the underwhelming spread of their base stat total, having a somewhat mid 85 HP with 79 defense and a decent special defense stat. The spread towards special attack is pretty much wasted on the mediocre 85 special attack stat. It's just very underwhelming compared to the whopping 135 attack that it already has. Slither Wing will definitely get a lot of usage, and I can see it paired with Torkoal in or out of Trick Room, as the speed stat is decent enough to utilize Scarf or set up Tailwind for it, and also maybe get some advantages under Trick Room if you actually want to go that route. And it's got an insane priority with First Impression, so maybe a little bit shy to get to the S tier. Alright, so now that we've got all the past Paradox Pokemon out of the way, let's go ahead and start off with the first future Paradox Pokemon, and that's Iron Bundle. And this is gonna be an easy an S tier. Like, I'm sorry, Iron Bundle is going to easily be an S tier pick. Super high base speed stat of 136 and great 124 base special attack, coupled with Freeze Dry. That's insane. It has notably high defense stat with 114 base defense, but it ain't really tanking any hits with that terrible 56 stat HP. Iron Bundle essentially works as the future Paradox Flutter Mane, being highly offensive and having very strong moves at its disposal, like Freeze Dry, allowing it to hit any water type Pokemon that wants to tank the typical ice type move, Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, and Blizzard. While this Pokemon's move pool is very limited, it more than makes up for it in the amount of offensive power it has, and the fact that it's one of the few Pokemon that learn Freeze Dry in the game currently, making it have more coverage outside of flying, ground, grass, fire, dragon, and rock, and adds water into the mix. As any Mon that took neutral due to the secondary typing being water will now take 4 times the damage. That's pretty significant, honestly. And Iron Bundle doesn't need much team setup or support to do damage and perform well. And this Pokemon also has a great speed control stab option in Icy Wind, which is definitely worth mentioning. And coupled with the amazing speed stat that this Pokemon has, it's definitely a good thing to run. It's also worth mentioning that it does also get Chilling Water and Aurora Veil, which makes it a solid option for snow teams. All in all, an easy S tier in my opinion. Next up, we have Iron Hands, and remember when I told you about having a better option for Trick Room? This is definitely the one. The go-to raid Pokemon. This has to be the easiest S tier of my life. Like, I can't even argue. Like, there's no way. You can't argue with me on this one. Like, there's just no way. What were they even thinking when they made this monster? 140 base attack with an absolutely ridiculous base 154 HP and 108 defense. Literally, what the hell were they thinking, bro? This Pokemon is, by, like, no doubt, going to be on a lot of Trick Room teams, and even outside of Trick Room. This Pokemon, this thing, is just scary, bro. It has access to some of the strongest stab moves in Wild Charge and Close Combat, coupled with Drain Punch and coverage options such as Rock Slide, Earthquake, Elemental Punches, Play Rough, and Iron Head. And as if its ridiculous base 140 attack stat wasn't enough, it has access to Belly Drum. Yeah, Belly Drum. What the fuck were they even thinking? I know. This thing is a monster. It's also worth mentioning it has access to Fake Out, which is a VGC staple, Brick Break for screens, and Low Sweep for some speed control. Not like it really needs it under Trick Room, but okay, I mean, it's worth mentioning, I guess. What else can I say? This Pokemon is perfect for Trick Room with that low speed stat, and it's just insanely bulky for an offensive beast. I don't think there's any way anyone can convince me this Pokemon isn't an S tier threat. Next up, we have Iron Jugulus, and Iron Jugulus is going to be an A tier threat. Alright, Iron Jugulus is a really good Pokemon, do not get me wrong. However, its strongest stab is Hurricane, and it's incredibly unreliable without the support of Rain, which is why I do believe it's not exactly going to be an S tier threat. Offensively, this Pokemon is very strong, with a base 122 special attack stat and a very good 108 speed stat, with access to Tailwind, making it a great Tailwind user, and it has great natural bulk with 94 base HP and 86 defense with 80 special defense. Unfortunately, it loses Draco Meteor as a nuke move, and it's replaced with the more unreliable Hurricane. I do believe that Iron Jugulus will be phenomenal under Rain, as those 100% accurate Hurricanes coupled with its buff from its ability, if activated of course, are going to be doing a lot of damage. It's worth noting that Iron Jugulus is able to enable Rain and Electric Terrain, which both benefit this Mon a lot, as well as having access to supportive options such as Snarl, Knockoff, and Tailwind like I mentioned prior, and also has a great variety of stab moves like Dark Pulse, Air Slash, Hurricane, and coverage moves such as Heat Wave, Earth Power, Fire Blast, and Hydro Pump, which is excellent for if you're actually going to be running it under Rain, and maybe with the Water Terra. This Mon feels like it should be an S tier, but compared to the other S tier Pokemon, it just fails by maybe just the slightest disadvantage. Feel free to of course disagree with me in the comments, but I think that we can all agree that this Pokemon will be performing incredibly well in Series 2. Now, let's go ahead and move with Iron Moth. Alright, so just like its past counterpart, Iron Moth is going to be an A tier threat. Now, Iron Moth is a strong, specially offensive Mon with stunning base 140 special attack and really good 110 speed, and comes with a decent natural bulk in the special defense side with 110 special defense and base 80 HP. You might be wondering, how is this an A tier threat and not an S tier? Well, I might be nitpicking here, but base 110 isn't phenomenal compared to the other S tier Pokemon speed tiers, and Iron Moth suffers from having a really strong stab move that is pretty unreliable, which is Sludge Wave. You see, Sludge Wave is an AoE move that hits both opposing Mons, but it also targets your ally, which makes this move super unreliable to spam or use as much or often at all, since you would need to either protect or be a steel type to be immune to it, which kinda sucks. In addition to this, its most reliable way of boosting its offenses is Fury Dance, which isn't exactly reliable since it's up to chance. Now, this doesn't mean that this Mon is bad by any means at all. It's still an A tier threat, and it has access to incredibly strong fire type moves such as Heat Wave, Fire Blast, and Overheat, as well as great coverage options like Hurricane, Energy Ball, Bug Buzz, And in addition, it has access to great supportive moves as well, like Struggle Bug to lower the opposing team's special attack, Metal Sound and Screech to lower both defenses on the opposing side, Light Screen, and Electric Terrain, which of course benefits it. It also is worth mentioning that it has access to Solar Beam, which it would be a good option if you're running Iron Moth under Sun. Very solid Pokemon that can definitely perform well on its own, but would be much better with the proper support. Next up is going to be Iron Thorn, and Iron Thorn is going to be a B tier Pokemon. Now, this one was a bit of a tough one to decide where it goes, honestly, but offensively speaking, this Pokemon has a lot of power and it's slightly faster than its counterpart Tyranitar. Yet it lacks the slightly better bulk and gives up the better ability, or somewhat better ability, in Sandstream, which made T-Tar more bulky. This mon still can function as a bulky offensive beast with its ability activated, and can also be ran purely offensively with a Scarf and Understand to give it that Spadef buff. Base stats are extremely similar to T-Tar since it has the similar base 100 HP and base 134 attack, while having a slightly higher speed with a base of 72 and slightly lower Spadef in 84. This mon is by no means bad at all, but there are better options to consider in this list, but this can still be a very good addition to your Sand team as it provides a great stab option in Rock Slide, Wild Charge, and Thunder Punch, while also providing great coverage in Earthquake, Elemental Punches, Crunch, and Body Press. It's also worth mentioning this mon gets access to Eerie Impulse to lower the opposing offenses, and Rock Tomb and Thunder Wave for speed control, which make this bulky offensive beast a great support option as well. All in all, this Pokemon, while not the best option as a standalone Paradox pick, it can still be a great addition in certain teams, and I could definitely be wrong on this, and this might even become a staple, but I personally just don't see it. Alright, so now let's go ahead and talk about Iron Threats. I was originally going to place this Pokemon in the B tier, but after much thinking, it made no sense to pair it with those in the B tier, and I do believe that this Pokemon is quite exceptional, which is why I'm going to put this Pokemon in the A tier. I mean, look at this thing's base stats, 112 attack and 106 speed. Nothing extremely crazy, but still very good coupled with a base 90 HP and 120 defense. This thing's physical bulk is insane for a fast offensive Pokemon at least. It's also Steel typing, which gives it a lot of resistances. The main reason I thought this mon would be B tier was because I felt that it lacked the power, but this thing has very strong stab moves like Iron Head, Heavy Slam, Earthquake, and Stomping Tantrum, while also having decent coverage with Ice Spinner, Rock Slide, Body Press, and Wild Charge, as well as great support in Knockoff for item removal and Rock Tomb or Bulldoze for speed control. This Pokemon is going to be a great Sand team option, as well as just a threat by itself, or should I say, threat, am I right? Jeez, this tier list is going on for too long. Anyways, so let's go into the last Paradox Pokemon, but clearly not the least, and this is Iron Valiant. Now, Iron Valiant is going to be an A tier threat. This Pokemon goes both ways, offensively speaking, as it has a whopping base 130 attack and a base 120 special attack, making this a very unpredictable Pokemon as it can be ran both physically, specially, or mixed offensive, and it certainly has the move pool to pretty much pull any of those off. It has great physical stat moves such as Close Combat and Spirit Break, as well as great physical coverage options such as Sin Headbutt or Psycho Cut for poison Pokemon that would otherwise wall it, Elemental Punches, plus Poison Jab, Shadow Claw, Liquidation, and X-Scissor, as well as a great priority in Shadow Sneak, supportive damage moves in Knockoff and Brick Break for screens, and longevity with Drain Punch. This thing also has an insane, specially offensive move pool with stab moves like Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, Aura Sphere, and Focus Miss. Yeah, I know, not the greatest option, but it's available, I guess. As well as great coverage options like Psyshock, Psychic, Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball, Energy Ball. Jesus, this list just goes on and on. You get the idea. This Pokemon has a pretty ridiculous move pool, and we're not even done yet. This Pokemon has some of the best supportive moves in the game, such as Wide Guard and Quick Guard, while also having speed control options like Icy Wind, Feint to break protects. It also has access to screens, Trick Room, Trick, and Encore, and it has access to 3 out of 4 terrain moves. This Pokemon is going to be absolutely crazy, whether it'll be special, physical, or mixed. Even a supportive option is going to go wild, because it's going to be extremely unpredictable, and that's probably why I'm going to move this Pokemon to be an S tier threat, because honestly, there's just no way you can tell me this Pokemon is going to not be an S tier threat. I mean, come on, right? Rather than A tier, I'm going to be placing them in S tier rather than A tier, because while its speed stat isn't the greatest, it's actually still really good. 116 is nothing to sneeze at, and it's a unique speed tier, and it doesn't have the greatest bulk. It has the element of surprise. It will almost certainly always generate doubt in your opponent's head, as they won't really be able to tell what you're packing. For that, I believe this Pokemon will, without a doubt, be a huge threat in the ladder, and it really just deserves the S tier. And that's the tier list. Yeah. Wow, this actually took me a lot more thinking than I actually anticipated. My brain is literally quite fried, and this went on maybe for a bit longer than I expected. But I do hope that this was helpful for when you're choosing your Paradox Pokemon. You know which ones are really good and which ones maybe just try to avoid at all. I wouldn't say that there's any Pokemon here that you should avoid at all, because honestly, I do feel like every single one of these work in the right condition. But you can see why the S tier Pokemon are just S tier Pokemon. And I really wanted to try and be extremely nitpicky in regards to like who I let in the S tier. But these Pokemon are just insanely good. Like, most of these Pokemon are just actually kinda broken, so I really couldn't help myself in putting so many Pokemon in the S tier. So yeah, I ended up just being nitpicky on being less good, I guess, and that's why I actually even removed the D tier, because there was no way I was gonna put any Pokemon in here in the D tier. So yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Feel free to disagree with my tier list, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below in regards to these Paradox Pokemon. I'd love to hear your thoughts as always. Thank you so much for tuning in, and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll be posting more Pokemon content in the channel, as well as streams, and you get the gist. So if you're interested, you know what to do. Anyways, later guys. Peace.